It's somewhat difficult to think where Chainsaw Man could go from here. As much as we are entering the final phase of the story, the length surrounding it is truly unpredictable. It could be relatively short or rather lengthy in comparison. But what these moments could eventually escalate and thrive into is purely up in the air. And with how unpredictable Fujimoto is, those things that are unpredictable, some of the most wildest, craziest, and wackiest ideas that you couldn't even imagine. Which I'm kind of hoping Chainsaw Man does, but also doesn't do at the same time. I guess it realistically depends on how Fujimoto wants to ground his story respectively within the world that he has created. And I say that extremely loosely, just because as of recently I just finished reading Fire Punch, and as much as I will have a separate full video on that, the amount of escalation and subverting of expectation is definitely enthralling to read, but completely all over the place. So I finally see a lot of the comparisons between Chainsaw Man and Fire Punch, and even though I'm not sure if Fujimoto has done any other work prior Fire Punch or even before Chainsaw Man, this narrative is a lot more cohesive. It's a lot more grounded, and the subverting of expectation, while there still is a small amount of it there, it's not as haphazardous or ridiculous in comparison to Fire Punch. It's not as all over the place or weirdly weaponized. However, Fire Punch has also proven that Fujimoto is extremely unpredictable and realistically does whatever he wants, so even though Chainsaw Man is one thing, it could eventually turn into another, and only time will tell with that regard. So far, 95 chapters, it's been somewhat pretty cemented within itself, but as of recently, especially with the introduction of the final phase, the skip, hops, and jumps have been not as noticeable, but starting to come in. This is not to alarm anyone, in a sense that we may or may not be running into a rushed conclusion, which obviously no one wants, but this small jump from Denji out of this situation with Kishibe, with Kobeni, reflecting on his own mental health, reflecting on the past, his emotions, his desires specifically, which is so integral with his character that's now becoming a lot more open for us as readers to more transparently understand him, what he wants, what are his desires, to then jumping to this situation with Makima when he was specifically stated that if he goes up against Makima, he will die. That jump is a little bit weird, and I'm hoping this doesn't signify the ending that could potentially happen in 5 to 10 chapters, which has got a lot of people somewhat spooked and comes into the form of Fujimoto being, once again, unpredictable. I'm hoping that jump or skip into this specific Makima and Denji fight was just for this purpose, just to get to this position, because this also in itself could be subverting of expectations, because this chapter is just fighting realistically. A lot of beautiful panels, a lot of viciousness and detail, and things are kind of just all over the place, but it's not as grand as the previous fight, which is what I mentioned last week. This fight is not meant to be as grand as that. It's meant to be a lot more personal, which is the reason, or at least half the reason, why Makima is also using her bare hands. She's not realistically using her abilities. She's not calling upon any other people that she's controlling. She's just fighting Denji with hand-to-hand combat. So it's very personal. It's a showcase of how strong she is and how overwhelming she is, trying to dominate him in that sense without using any of the incredible or insane abilities that she does have. Mind you, Denji at this point has already fought the powerful people that she put out to play, and that was based off his own desires. His desires got him through those people. His will and want and the fire within himself to continue forward to become the Chainsaw Man for the people, for the admiration and the love that he was receiving, even though that retroactively weakens him. It doesn't make him strong, it severely puts him at a disadvantage. But then you come to this moment where Makima is the person he has to go up against, and his desires and his will and that specific fire that he has to continue fighting is not enough. Even though he was done within the previous chapter, Makima brings him back just to fight him again and to showcase just how different they are in terms of strength and power and how overwhelming Makima's pressure is, which for me is vital for her character. Even though you already know this and you've seen this countless times again, this is one of, if not the most personal fights we have from her. It may seem like she's not taking this seriously, but it's probably the most serious she has been. that she's somewhat thinking about the situation rather profoundly and how she wants to belittle Denji as much as possible, not using all the powers that she has or trying to kill him instantly. She wants to notch him down piece by piece and to show him just how worthless he truly is, and she does do that within this chapter. This fight basically encaptures that. I think it's also important to mention that Makima is completely unfazed towards this. I mean, everything she's done throughout the story, especially when it comes to fighting, she's usually pretty unfazed. She never really shows much emotion, and there's only been specific times within fights where she would show a little bit of emotion, but it would mostly be anger, or even something where she seems annoyed or fed up for the situation. I'd like to believe that she's somewhat disappointed and bored within this fight. Fujimoto found a way to kind of show off her face as much as possible within these chaotic moments where Denji is completely obscure and fighting so drastically and desperately to save himself, to kill Makima, to fulfill his desires, his wants. And then you see Makima where the only thing that's kind of visible with her, realistically, that's clear within all this fighting and chaotic movement is her face. She just seems tired. She seems bored, disappointed specifically, once again, at Denji, that this is not the person that she wanted. This is not the Chainsaw Man devil that she is so infatuated with that she is thrilled to even fight. And it's just a constant reminder for us as readers that as powerful as she is and how she could stop this situation in a matter of seconds, her fighting Denji with bare hands is a showcase of dominance. But she's somewhat sending a message, because after all of this, you get a very gorgeous and gripping panel of Denji and Makima and all of these crosses within the background, and it's very poetic in a sense. It's very sublime. Can't necessarily find the right words for it. It's something about the poses that they're in, something about the crosses in the background, and Makima's facial expression somewhat looking down on Denji, pulling out his heart and his body basically ripped in two. As gruesome and graphic as it is, it's also filled with a lot of emotion. With this, obviously Denji is defeated. The future for him isn't necessarily looking all too bright, but Makima pretty much questions his integrity. What can she do or provide that would allow Denji to give up on this world? Basically, what can she do to make him the Chainsaw Man once again? Because his desires, his wants, have now become so very flirtatious and effective where it's pushing him forward now, it's propelling him. They're a lot more bigger and a lot more fueled than they were before. These are desires not connected to Makima, not the ones provided via her. This is the things provided or built upon, I should say, by the community's response or the people's response to Chainsaw Man. How much love and affection and admiration they had for him. When he's seen that in this time of disbelief, in this time of brokenness, and in this time of self-judgment where he didn't know what he wanted, where he recognized his life was a lie, his goals were fake, his desire and will was all puppeteered and manipulated by Makima herself, yet even he still recognizes that he still likes Makima. The thing that grew from that was his own goals and desires. They were cut off and somewhat born anew because of these people that he witnessed on the television. This is the reason why he was fighting so desperately without going into that form. This is the reason why Makima is using her bare hands and not using abilities to just obliterate him time and time again. This is the reason why she's questioning what she can do to strip away Denji's own personal desires and wants. What can she do to make him give up on the world? Which is the reason why she distinctively separates Denji and Chainsaw Man from one another. That the person getting in her way now is Denji. You can tell she is extremely infatuated and obsessed with him, but the version of Chainsaw Man that Denji is so disrespectful in her eyes. Everything that Denji is doing now is trampling on the idea that Makima has of Chainsaw Man. And by the end of the chapter, you see her very expressionless face now with a little bit of expression, now with a little bit of anger, with a little bit of determination to separate Denji and Chainsaw Man from one another, as she rips Pochita or Chainsaw Man away from Denji's body and leaves him there lifeless, limbless, completely obliterated. A great closing to a rather simplistic chapter. Not much dialogue, just filled with a lot of fighting, but the artwork throughout it was just absolutely incredible. Very graphic, but phenomenally well done, and felt like it had a lot of emotion and meaning behind it, even if it wasn't so inherently obvious. I'm sure if you comb through it, you could find a lot more meaning for it, but the whole chapter in itself was absolutely amazing. Once again, I am interested to see where this goes. How does the story develop further? How do we implement these cohesive ties? How does Denji evolve from here? How does Makima respond to it? How will the Four Horsemen come into play? How will power come into play? How will the primordial fears come into play? There's a lot of different things that have yet to be explored or even opened up to. So while we are entering the final phase of the story, the amount of narrative that is actually left is hopefully still quite a bit. And hopefully he can bring his story to a beautiful conclusion in whatever way he sees fit. As all over the place Fire Punch was, I have faith that he's learned a lot of things from that series and can only hope he puts them to extremely good use here within Chainsaw Man. So with that being said, let me know how you felt about the chapter. How'd you feel about the fighting, some of the specific gorgeous panel works, even the end bit of dialogue with Makima? I'd love to hear your thoughts. But I want to thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Drink plenty of water and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.